It's a very beautiful understanding given by our acharyas. Is that material manifestations or material facilities are not false or illusory or futile or good for nothing. To consider like this is lack of depth of the knowledge of reality. So material manifestations and facilities are not false or futile or useless. The problem is that these material manifestations and facilities are misoriented and misdirected or misutilized. So because they are misdirected and misutilized, they give a completely wrong result, which is furthering of the ignorance, the darkness, and the agony for the living entity. So utilizing everything in Krishna consciousness, why is it being glorified and exemplified, or why is it being positioned as one of the very important pillars of devotional service? So the Prabhupada is describing it as the secret of devotional service. Because the same material manifestations and facilities can actually aid us in our devotional service. Their actual and factual position is to aid in devotional service only. But the wrong result comes because of misutilization. So therefore, negation or abnegation may just be, is at best just a temporary stage recommended for a neophyte who is too attached to misutilizing to actually come out of his inertia of misutilizing, of his addiction of misutilizing, to just gain some, to just come out of that loop and then think fresh again, and then one can take it back and offer it to Krishna. So that's the only thing for what negation is meant for. But many times, devotees start developing a kind of aversion or abhorrence towards material aspects. Like say, for example, Sometimes devotees are saying, oh, material education is very bad. Jada Vidya, Mayar Vaibhav, Jeev ki banaye gadha. No, that's true. That's, so why should one focus on it? Or why at all should one? So this was happening even in the early times of the movement as well. And many devotees gave up their educational degrees also. Because Jiva ke banaye gadha, why to become gadha? Like that. But then it was seen that this move led to a lot of instability. Because if you remember, some time back, a month back or so, when His Holiness Bhakti Vasudev Maharaj had come, then Maharaj was telling a very beautiful point. Then he was telling many times when you when you deeply go in the study of any kind of material energy, the knowledge per se, may not be something, may not be something which can be directly used for glorification of Krishna. But the point is that the knowledge per se is may not be immediately relatable, applicable, and so on. But actually, that the effect it creates on the power of thinking, on the way of thinking, the way of analyzing things, that helps one. That helps one in relating with the world, in relating with the devotees more nicely. And this is one aspect that Maharaj was bringing out. So therefore, material education is never a futile thing, because at least it is giving a good case study, because it is actually sharpening the intellectual capacities, the capacities to think, to go deeper, to analyze, to so person is becoming more broad in his perspectives. So it is never a failure. Is it not? It is never a failure. It is never futile. So therefore, this kind of negation or extreme aversion, or this kind of negation and aversion actually is an extreme stand. And we know from the Shastras that any extreme position is going to flip-flop. It is never going to be stable. So therefore, we see devotees many times taking extreme stands, and then actually from one extreme, they hop to the other extreme, because it's a flip-flop. So that is why the principle is, so that is why there is no point in sort of cursing one's material orientation. Okay, why am I like this? Whatever we have gathered can be dovetailed in a unique way in serving Krishna. That is exactly the point. Like say, materially speaking, Srila Prabhupada has a pharmacy orientation. Materially speaking. Because Srila Prabhupada had a pharmacy orientation, if you see, Srila Prabhupada, we see many times Prabhupada's reciprocation with Prabhupada's disciples, and Prabhupada is giving them nice prescriptions of how various diseases can be cured and this and that. And that was very much that was a very deep, warm investment from Srila Prabhupada's side in the disciples' hearts, is it not? So, so now because So so good amount of that understanding is coming from Srila Prabhupada's pharmacy orientation, is it not? Because he had that pharmacy orientation, and therefore Prabhupada in his dealings he could utilize that and to express his care, to express his uh, you know uh, so so that knowledge was not futile; it got utilized in Krishna service, is it not? That's the point. That is the point. Uh, Similarly, Bhaktitirtha Maharaj from a psychology orientation, is it not? And because he was a psychology orientation, you see, Maharaj many times goes very deep in concepts in terms of meditations, in terms of thinking deeper. Like we see Maharaj's books on Beggar series or Spiritual Warrior series. So many of these actually go into meditations. Now, these kind of meditations, all that is coming from Maharaj's psychological or psychology orientation, actually, materially speaking. So, uh, similarly, so no orientation goes in waste in that sense. Similarly, Sadapur Prabhu was from a high-end mathematics orientation, and because of that, actually, he could give some shape and mathematical models to various constructs in the Vedas, which were not understandable and relatable. And because Prabhu gave certain models to understanding it, actually, devotees in our movement are able to understand and appreciate it a bit better. Like say, for example, Bhagavatam's fifth canto description. It is Prabhuji who had given this idea that they're not talking about, this is all actually existing in a higher dimensional plane. It's not just three-dimensional reality. But what actually Sukadev Goswami is talking about is they're talking in terms of isometric projections. Because what do we understand? That this is flat and the Bhumandala is very flat. And then there are these seven, and then in between, the mountain is, and it's being talked about in so those kind of concepts we are able to make sense of it, just because otherwise it was unrelatable. What does it mean? What does it mean? So you see, that is the point. So therefore, what is therefore the Yukta Vairagya principle is a secret by which anyone and everyone can actually go into a very intense absorbed state of devotional service by utilizing whatever one has in Krishna service. By utilizing and investing whatever one has in Krishna service. That's the point. So this is the point, actually. Yes. So only thing one has to be careful about is that, okay, when one is thinking of acquiring further material skills, then the only care should be taken is to be balanced. Because sometimes, like if it takes, say 10 more years to acquire a certain skill, then one should be sure that actually, what is going to be the utility of it? How much it's going to be a utility of it. So there one has to be careful. Extra skill. Like Prabhupada did not encourage devotees learning, say, Sanskrit, in a very precise, perfectionist manner. Because they say it takes 12 years to learn Sanskrit. That is 12 years to learn Sanskrit very, 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 very meticulously. Then you can start reading every single then you can start dissecting every single this thing of the Vedas. And Prabhupada said you'll get confused. So the more you know how to dissect, the more you get confused. And that's what happened. As certain devotees who dived into Sanskrit, they started finding faults with Prabhupada's translations itself, because they got too much power of dissecting. You know? So they got so much power of dissecting, and therefore, so many options, so many things came in front of them. They just couldn't understand what is right, what is wrong. So that becomes a problem. But somebody is already a Sanskrit scholar. Oh, he can use the Sanskrit in service to Krishna. Is that not? Like that. And that's the point. Somebody is already an astrologer, he uses astrology in Krishna service. Somebody. So that's the point, actually. That devotional service is very easy. Devotional services. So therefore, devotional service is personal. That is the reason, you see, Srila Prabhupada never made a very standard template of, a very precise standard template of what is a preacher. Prabhupada would always say every preacher has its own unique traits. Every preacher has its own style. And the Prabhupada used to give the example for doctor, I believe. So just like a doctor teaches treats his patients in his own way, in his own style. Similarly, a teacher teaches in his own style. Every preacher has its own style. Prabhupada would always say that. Why? Because the same reason. Because everyone has is in a different position of conditioning, of material skills, of his so therefore, Prabhupada said yes. And you see, that's why Srila Prabhupada did not make a one standard system for all the temples also, or a one standard emphasis for all the temples also. So Prabhupada made temple as an independent unit of authority to decide what they want to emphasize on in Krishna consciousness. Whether they want to emphasize on book distribution or congregational development or Rath Yatra, or that freedom was there with the temples. Prabhupada just introduced a good number of ways in which one can reach Krishna, or one can actually serve Krishna. And devotional service is exactly about that. There are these multitude of ways in which Krishna can be served. That's what we understand. So in the very basic foundation of it, we are seeing Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atmanivedana. And you see what Srila Rupa Goswami and Prabhupada is explaining, that any one of these is potent to take one back to Godhead. What should one follow? One can follow any one, or a combination, or all of them also. And Prabhupada is giving examples of everything, is it not? So examples of devotees who followed one of them. And we see Prahlad Maharaj, and we see Parikshit Maharaj, and we see Hanumanji, the Bali Maharaj is Atmanivedanam is doing. And Prabhupada is giving example of devotees who followed all of them together. That is Ambarish Maharaj. Is it not? So one can follow anything. You see, the same principle is taken forward. So Srila Prabhupada in that way introduced not just one way to become Krishna conscious, or one way to please Krishna. Prabhupada introduced multitude of ways in which one can please Krishna. Okay, so what should one follow? One follows whatever he can. Whatever he can, or wherever he can get fixity about. Is it not? Whatever one can get absorbed about. That's the whole point. So so one can focus on one thing, two things, three things, four things, all the things. Everything will give enhancement and advancement in Krishna consciousness. So Krishna consciousness is not a singleton, or no, is not a singleton set. It's not a singleton track. Krishna consciousness exists in multitude, and one can just relate with any of the threads of Krishna consciousness, any or many. That's our choice, and just go on going deeper and more sincere about it, more and more deeper, and more intensive, more and more absorbed about it. And any one thread, when takes and grows and makes it more and more intense, is potent enough to uh, award one spiritual emancipation. That is why, because there is this multitude, because there is this multitude, which is existing, the Shastras are talking about a vision of accepting the variegatedness. That is why the Shastras are talking about a vision of respect, of accepting the variegatedness. So that means that, so all this sinks in, because this is from the root, it is coming from the very definition of devotional service. Devotional service, 9 different activities are proposed. 9 is seed. That's like 3 basic colors, RGB. They lead to an entire foray or a